Hello and welcome to another episode of Digital Techniques. My name is Dawn Griffin of zfcomics.com, and this is brought to you by the webcomicalliance.com. And this episode I want to discuss InDesign and give you a basic rundown of the essentials that you'll need to put together your own book. So I have InDesign open here. I'm going to go to File, New Document. And here you can lay out the sizing and columns, which you probably will just stick with one, but in case you need more than one column, you can change it there. Margins, which you should gather information about from your printer, particularly what changes is the inside. Depending on how big your book is, sometimes the inside margin becomes bigger. If your book is very small, you probably would have the same amount of inside margin as you would on the outside or the top and bottom. So these are things to pay attention to and gather information prior to making your book so that you can lay it out correctly in the first place. So I'm just going to make an 8.5 by 8.5 book, just as an example, with margins 1/2 inch in all the way around. Alright, now here is our first document. Now I want to show you the master pages, and just under the pages palette here. And if you notice at the top, it says A Master. This is basically your default master page, and this is where you would locate any master pages. You can make multiple ones, but this is where you would locate them. Underneath is the document pages. This is where you actually lay out your book. If you go down here, like the new, just like in Photoshop or Illustrator, a new layer, you can press that and you'll see different pages added to the master if you have that selected, or you can delete pages in the same way. If you go down to the document pages down here, you can create new pages in the same respect. And you can see this is actually set up in spreads because InDesign is meant for making a book. So you have your left page and your right page. And that is all set up that way. Now in case your printer wants a non-spread, just one page at a time, you can actually alter that. I believe that's in Document Setup. Let's see where it says Facing Pages. So if you click that off, it would then give you just one up at a time. But most places, I think, are going to ask for a spread. Alright, so let me show you what a master page can do and the purpose of it. So if you go into the master page here, now you can go in, you could change the master page. You can do a new master, master options for a master, and you can change the name of it if it's helpful to you. If you're doing multiple different types of master pages, which you probably would have just one or two for making a comic collection, but this is where you can change the names so that you can better organize them. So I'm going to go on to the master page here, make sure it's selected. See, it's selected in blue there. And here's the tool palette. Mainly what you're going to need to know is the selection tool and the direct selection tool. There's two different ways to select different objects in InDesign, and I'll show you that later. It's the type tool, just like in Photoshop or Illustrator. The pen tool, same as in Illustrator. And the rectangle frame tool, this is key for placing images. And the rectangle tool basically creates like a box, like just like you would in Illustrator. Those are the main tools you will use. Obviously there's your zoom tool and your hand tool as well. But let me just lay out for you here what you might use repeatedly on a master page. Master pages are much like PowerPoint master slides where you create the slide and it repeats throughout. So if you wanted to make sure everything was exactly the same, it lined up correctly, had the same footer, the same header, the same images or logos, you could do that on a master slide. And master pages in InDesign are exactly the same thing. So let's say you wanted to have 2 comics up. If you do a comic strip, this is a possibility. So I'm going to take my rectangle frame tool. Say I'll have a comic there. I'd like to point out here the frame tool always has an X through it. That's how you can tell it's different from the regular rectangle tool. And I also like to point out when you have a master page selected here, you'll notice that it has dotted lines. This is helpful because if you're working on a master page and you draw something that has dotted lines and you intended it to be on a regular page, then it'll jump out at you because you realize it's a dotted line. It tells you it's a master page. So I'm going to select this and copy paste just like you would in Illustrator or Photoshop. And let's say you want to add underneath maybe some commentary or something. So I'm using the type tool just like you would otherwise, and I'm going to have the commentary lie underneath there. And once more down here. Now I'm selecting the type tool with the direct selection, with the selection tool up here, the black arrow, and that allows me to change it. Alright, so we have 2 boxes for the images and 2 text boxes there. And now I'm going to add the page number, which you might want to have on your book. I'm just going to draw approximately where it'd be, where I'd like to have it on each page. And this is how you basically program it to always count up with page numbers. You do this on the master page. If you want to have something beforehand, you can actually type out page, like so. Or you don't have to, you can just leave it as is. And then where you want the number to go, you leave the cursor there. And go up to the top where it says type. And go to insert special character. And then you go to markers. And then it's markers. And then current page number. That's going to say A here. But in the rest of the document, when you actually are looking at the regular document pages, you'll notice that it changes to 1 or 2 or 3 depending on the page number. So, and if you want the page on the other side the same way, then you do the same thing. Type special character markers and current page number. The same respect. Now I'm going to actually make this flush right, and just like in Photoshop, Illustrator, much of this is the same. There's a paragraph palette that'll look similar to a lot of those applications. You can align right, and the other one was already aligned left to begin with. I'm just going to scoot this down a little bit. And I'm going to copy paste these 2, put them over here. Alright, and this basically sets up our basic master page. Now it's set up, I'd like to show you what it's done for the rest of the pages in the regular document. So I'm going to double click on page 2, and as you can see, page 2 pops up with the number there at the bottom. Now here's something that I'd like to point out. Now, master pages, when they are applied to the regular pages, usually it's meant for things that are in the background that aren't going to move, that you don't need to touch. But what you can do is basically use these again, because right now you cannot select any of the things that we made on the master page. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, go back on the master page and select anything I'd like to edit, which will be these 4 these items here. And under the menu, where it says allow master item overrides on selection, make sure that's checked. It's by default it's usually checked. So once you make sure that that is correct, you can go back to the regular pages. And what I do is I right click on the page and see where it says override all master page items. And poof, these come back up and they're right in the same spot. And now what you can do, if you wanted to add text underneath, you can double click, add text here, same with down here. And with the text here, much like Illustrator, much like Photoshop, you can go into the character palette and you can change anything you like about it, the font, the size, anything you like, which is pretty typical in Adobe programs. One thing I like to point out though is character styles, and much like master pages, character styles, you can set up a specific style. And this is great as a graphic designer if you want to keep everything very similar and making sure that every time you have subtext underneath your comic, it's exactly the same size font, the same leading, same kerning, everything. So what you can do is you can hit a new character style, double click on it, and you can call it subtext or whatever you like to call it. And then you can go into all these different types of options where you can change anything you want. You can have the character color, you can actually have it always be a gray or a red or a blue, whatever you prefer the subtext to be. Underlining options, basic character formats, which is where you spend most of your time most likely, but you could select any font you want, any style you want, any size that you'd like. Leading, if you always want it to be 14 points, say. You can go in and check everything. It's how I always want it underlined, or I always want strike through. Anything you could want is listed here, and then that way all you have to do is click on the character style and it'll change that font with all those options. So as you can see, this changed my font to that funky font that I just picked up, and then my subtext here. And that way everything will be the same. So that's a handy tool to have, these character styles. Good to know them. There's also a paragraph style as well, which has a lot more options as opposed to just a character. So this would be for more advanced. I would just stick to character style. I think that's enough for what you would be doing in making a comic strip or comic book collection. Now I want to show you how to place an image, how to bring your comics in. If you could refer to the article that I wrote on the webcomic.alliance.com about InDesign, I actually detail how to save all of your file formats out of Photoshop, out of Illustrator, so that you could bring them into InDesign. InDesign will accept it and it'll print decently high quality. So refer to that article, and because I lay out exactly what you need to know to prepare all of your comics for InDesign. So once you have your rectangle tool, you could select the frame, go to File, go to Place, and I'm just going to select a comic here. We'll place in there your comic. It might look a little bit mapped, that's just the preview of it. And here's the difference between the direct selection tool and the regular selection tool. The regular selection tool will select the frame around the image. The direct selection tool will turn into a hand over top of your image and will select the image itself. As you can see, the box continues out here. This is how big the comic is to start. So what you can do is manually, with the shift button or whatever you please, you can go in and actually change the size and do this manually until you get the size that you. Another way that you can change the scale of an image that's in a rectangle frame that's laid out here is to go under Window, under Object and Layout, and go to Transform. That brings up this palette here, and you can type in a number here. Make sure this is linked so it stays proportional, but you can type in a number that might be closer to what you're looking for. And if you have that number memorized after a while, you can just type in, if your comics are all the same size, you can type in that number so that it'll fit into the box. Another way, if you don't want to use that tool, to resize, say it's way too big, is to go to Content, Object, Fitting, and Fit Content to Frame, and it'll automatically plop it right in there. It's probably the easiest way of doing it. And I also like to point out now the links palette. The key point in InDesign is keeping all of your comic files in the same spot and along with the InDesign file, because while this is here in InDesign, it's still linked to the original file, which for me is an Illustrator file. It's still linked to that, so if you move that file somewhere else on your computer, it will lose the link to that file. So a key point in organizing your files, if you ever care to go back and change them, is to keep everything together. That way, if you make changes to the Illustrator file or the Photoshop file with the actual comic, it'll update in InDesign automatically, which is quite handy. So here under Links palette, it'll show you how many images are placed. So if I go here and I place another comic, I can do 402 here. It will pop up as well. Have both of these, and as you start adding more, you'll have more and more and more links involved. I'll show you again how to fit that object, fitting, fit content to frame. Poof. So that is the basics of how to lay out text and images in InDesign, using character styles to set your type accordingly. As you can see how easy that is to change the style. Using master pages so that you could have each and every page be laid out exactly the same as you go throughout your document. And now for saving. To save a file, it's as simple as going to File and Save As, and it'll save an InDesign document, which is INDD. You could save it, and as I said, just make sure it's saved with or close to all of your comic files, and that they will be archived together, not separately. And once you have saved the InDesign file, then you would go to you would want to make a PDF with a printer, and you do that by going to Export and select PDF, Print. And then you get this big dialog box full of lots of options. But the handy thing about PDF presets is that it changes most of those options for you, as long as you know what you're grabbing. And the best thing to grab to use for these presets for actual printing is to use Press Quality. As you can see, use these settings to create PDF documents best suited for high-quality pre-press printing. So this is a great place to start. Just make sure this is press quality. Then again, you have to get some information from your printer to know what you need in terms of bleed, which is under marks and bleed. This is something you'll have to make sure you set up. Even if you actually build bleed into your image files, you will have to make sure this is set correctly as well, because it will only print right to the edge unless this is set differently. So you could do, 1/4 inch bleed all around. And this little link tool, you can turn that off, and then you can make all the bleeds different if that is needed. Also, you could add crop marks here, or any other marks that they might need. Your printer should give you all of this information. And other than that, everything else is pretty much set as is and should be good to go. Pages would be all, and then you'd have to find out from your printer if they prefer spreads or not having spreads. And you can have that checked or not checked because of that. And then once that information is all set up, then you can hit export, and InDesign will export your PDF file. And that is the basics of InDesign. Again, my name is Dawn Griffin of zfcomics.com, and this is brought to you by the webcomic alliance.com.